Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. In this video, what I'm going to do is talk to you guys about switching to Linux. I'm going to bring up the pros and the cons when it comes to the migration process, some of the things that you can expect along the way, and also sometimes it's about managing your expectations. But before we get to that, though, I need to make you guys aware of the fact that I have 2 brand new courses available over on Udemy. First, if you're in the process of learning Linux for the very first time, you should definitely check out my Linux Essentials course. Not only will this course teach you everything you need to know to get started and learn the basics of Linux, it's also going to help you get certified and earn your Linux Essentials credential through LPI. And the Linux Professional Institute is the world's largest Linux and open source focused vendor-neutral certification body, so by earning certifications through LPI, your credentials will be recognized around the world. But even if you don't have any interest in getting certified, this course is still a great fit for those of you that are getting started with Linux because it'll teach you all the basics. Also, I recently released an Ansible course as well, which will teach you everything you need to know to get up and running with Ansible. Ansible is one of, if not the most popular configuration and automation platforms in the Linux ecosystem, so it's definitely something that you need to learn. Ansible is a powerful and easy to learn platform that'll enable you to automate even the most complicated Linux administration tasks. And just like with my Linux course, each lesson will break down even the most complicated components and concepts into easy to understand lessons. And by the end of the course, you'll learn everything that you need to know to use Ansible as part of your daily toolset. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting Linux learning. I really appreciate it. Now, with all of that out of the way, it's time to dive in and talk about migrating to Linux. So what are the pros and cons when it comes to switching to Linux? Well, let's talk about it. First, let's begin with the pro. If you switch to Linux, your hardware will be unrestricted by licensing. And I wanted to start with this because this was one of the main reasons why I switched to Linux in the first place. Now, I told this story a few times in the past, but around the time when Windows XP was the most current version of Windows, that's what I was using at the time. And being a tweaker, I just love to reinstall the operating system and just, try to squeeze as much performance out of my computer as I could. And that was important because I was quite poor. My computer was just not all that great. Anyway, at the time, I didn't have an internet connection or a phone. If I wanted to use the internet, I just used the internet at the college. I didn't really need internet at home at all. So what I used my computer for was just to game. I love to play games, and that's what I did. Now, one day when I reinstalled Windows XP, it wouldn't even let me use my computer because I needed to activate. Now, I don't have an internet connection, so what I had to do was write down the activation code, a long series of characters, onto a piece of paper. And then I, walked down to a payphone, because again, I didn't have a phone, and I used the 1-800 number to get the activation key from the Microsoft automated hotline. And then after writing that down, I walked back in the freezing November cold, walked back into my house, and I was able to activate Windows and I was good to go. But the thing is, I wondered, why am I asking permission to use my own computer? But the thing is, when it comes to Linux, you don't have to ask permission to use your computer. Sure, there is such a thing as Linux distributions that are available for a licensing cost. They do exist, but for the most part, the majority of distributions can be downloaded for free, and you don't have to, purchase a license or activate anything. You simply install it and you're good to go. So you cut that middleman right out of the equation. It's your computer, your rules, and finally, you don't have to deal with licensing. Next, to even this out, let's talk about a con of switching to Linux. And that is, if you switch to Linux, you'll find that vendors don't develop software with Linux in mind, only as an afterthought. And at first, this might be a bit misleading. You'll hear Linux users tell you things like, Linux works on everything, it installs on everything. Well, that's just simply not true. The thing is, a Linux distribution is, an operating system, and just like all other operating systems, it's not going to be compatible with everything. Now, taking that out of the equation, if we look at hardware vendors and even software vendors, what you'll find is that Linux is an afterthought. So if we take the hardware equation out, we still kind of have a software problem, but we also have a hardware problem because often hardware drivers aren't made available for Linux as well. Now, at first, that makes it seem like Linux is just not something that you can use. I mean, if hardware vendors ignore it, then why even use it? But the truth is, Linux has the best hardware compatibility of any operating system on the planet. But the problem is, and this is where people run into a problem, very popular pieces of hardware like GPUs, Wi Fi cards, and even some network cards may not work on Linux. And it's not Linux's fault. It's just that the developer or the vendor of that hardware didn't QA it for another platform. I mean, if you think about it, you'll have the exact same experience if you try to get macOS running on Windows. There's a specific type of hardware for each operating system. And again, Linux is really good about hardware. I don't want to paint the picture that everything is bleak. It's just that a lot of people really care about GPUs and a lot of people really care about Wi Fi as well. And those two things really just tend to be a sticking point. But if you choose hardware that is known to work with Linux, for example, if you buy a GPU and you research Linux compatibility first, and you also research Linux compatibility first when it comes to your Wi Fi card, you'll have a much better experience. However, the problem is a lot of people don't test things first and they make an assumption that if they buy a piece of hardware, it's going to work, probably because another Linux user told them that Linux works with everything, just to find out that it doesn't. So you'll have to keep in mind that some vendors out there just really have poor Linux support, and you'll have to know what does and doesn't have good Linux support before you buy it. Now let's talk about a pro when it comes to switching to Linux. If you switch to Linux, you'll find a lot of customization options. In fact, the Linux operating system platform has more customization than any other platform. If you can think it, chances are you could probably do it. Now, unfortunately, sometimes all of that customization can be quite overwhelming to newcomers. I mean, just imagine if you log into an operating environment and you see a bunch of buttons, sliders, and toggles all over the place. You'll probably not really know what you're doing, and some people might be afraid of touching certain things if they're, a beginner when it comes to computing, for example. I think having a lot of customization options is a great thing, but some people might see it as a negative. That said, when it comes to Linux, we have all kinds of options, and some of which you probably weren't even aware that they would be options in the first place. I mean, for example, if you use Windows or Mac OS, then you use the Windows UI or the Mac OS UI. Sure, you could change the wallpaper, the color gradients. They do let you change things, but really not all that much when it comes to or is compared against Linux. When it comes to Linux, we can actually change the entire desktop environment, the entire GUI. So imagine logging into Mac OS, for example, deciding that you hate the UI and downloading a different one with it still being Mac OS underneath. That's kind of how Linux works. We have Linux, and then we have the desktop environment or the user's GUI layer on top of that, and we can manage that or, take that out and replace it with something else at will, which gives us a lot of flexibility. So what that means is that if you hate the UI of the Linux distribution that you decided to choose, there's other ones out there. But again, all of this choice and customization might be a negative to people that really just want a more standard direction. Next, let's move on to a con when it comes to switching to Linux. If you switch to Linux and you're a gamer, you'll find that unfortunately not as many games are made available for Linux when compared to Windows. And this is a good example when it comes to managing expectations. That's something that I brought up near the beginning of this video, and I feel that that's key. We have to have good or, reasonable expectations when we're switching to a different platform. And the thing is, if you're a gamer, then unfortunately, Linux is okay right now. It's actually in a pretty okay place, but there's just a lot more to go. So you might find that some of your favorite games just aren't made available. And the reason why I bring up managing expectations here is because it's not the fault of Linux when it comes to the games not being made available often for Linux. That's the fault of the developers. They have no excuse at this point because there's so many different libraries, toolkits, and ways to develop games that it's never been easier than it is right now to develop a game for Linux. But still, developers just stay in their old habits and they continue to do things that they've always done them. Not that there's anything wrong with the way that they were doing things, but there just really isn't all that much incentive for them to try and approach another platform. Now, some people might say that Linux is horrible because you have to have good games to get traction in the market, but that's simply not true. Now, it is true that when it comes to gaming, you have to have games to get traction in the gaming market. So obviously, a platform that has fewer games than Windows is not going to do a good job competing against Windows in that market. But that's not the only place where Linux is used. Some people don't play games. So if you're an individual that isn't really into games, or maybe you're more into console games, then in that case, you probably really don't care about this. Now, if you're a, big time gamer, you care a lot about this, and chances are you'll probably need to keep a Windows partition around for a little while longer until the situation changes. Now, getting back to managing expectations, it's silly to be upset with Linux when it comes to games not being available on Linux. Again, that's not the fault of Linux. And Linux doesn't suck just because there aren't games available. Sure, it might suck for a gamer, but for the rest of us, it's totally fine. And there's also some really cool workarounds like Play on Linux, Lutris. There's also Steam. There's built-in Proton compatibility now that works very well. So there's a lot of great technologies that are making this better than ever before, and it's only going to get better from here. But again, if you're a gamer, you might be keeping Windows around just a little bit longer. Sorry to interrupt my own video, but I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I love creating Linux-related content for you guys. But unfortunately, producing high-quality Linux content like this isn't cheap. But if you want to help me make even more content for you guys, then consider supporting Learn Linux TV. And a great way to do that is to check out the official shop for Learn Linux TV, which was just recently updated. Inside the shop, you'll find distro-themed shirts, bags, drinkware, and more. And there's some other surprises there as well. For example, I've just introduced a mousepad that doubles as a Tmux cheat sheet. How cool is that? So check out the shop at merch.learnlinux.tv, or you could check out the merch shelf right here on YouTube. You could get yourself something really cool and support Linux learning at the same time, so it's a win-win. Anyway, thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the video. Next, let's bring up a pro when it comes to switching to Linux. If you're a developer, you're going to love it. The thing is, the Linux platform is easily the best platform for developers, period, and it's not even close. Sure, macOS is pretty good too, and there's all kinds of great tools available for macOS, and developers do love macOS. But when it comes to Linux, development is at its core. It's at the core of what it is. Development tools are easily made available. It's part of the architecture and even the ecosystem of Linux to make development tools easily obtainable. And if you're a developer, then I think it's a great platform. And again, I think it's the best platform. Now, that's not to say that just because you're a developer, you're automatically going to have a great time. Don't get me wrong, there is a learning curve, and that learning curve will disrupt your workflow. I mean, that's just the way it goes. When you change from one platform to another, you have to learn that platform, right? And the process of learning a platform is disruptive. It always will be. It's frustrating. It's always going to be frustrating. You just have to get through it. But what I think is the case is that after you get through it, you'll find that you'll love it, because if you're a developer, all of the development tools that you'll ever need access to are right there at your fingertips. For example, if you install Fedora, it's a great Linux distribution, you have the ability to spin up VMs right there inside Fedora without doing anything else. It's literally built in. And that's just one example. There's distributions that do a good job, a not so great job. It really just depends on the distribution. But if you're choosing a primary, popular distribution, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, and a number of the more popular ones, then you're going to have a great time as a developer with Linux. Next is time for a con. And unfortunately, this is a big one. And the con at this point in the video is the Linux community. Seriously. Linux community. What am I going to do with you? Here's the thing. The Linux desktop is very far along. There's a few rough edges here and there, things that may not work as well as on other platforms, but for the most part, basic usage, it's there. It's totally there, and it's a great platform, but it still could go a little bit further, and what's holding it back is, surprisingly, the Linux community. The problem is there's a lot of infighting within the Linux community, and when you have developers that are working, they're donating their time to help develop these things. They don't get paid for this stuff often. So the fact is they're donating their time. And if the project is divisive in any way, then there's going to be, some arguing about it. And sometimes the developers, in my opinion, they're just not going to be as motivated to develop for Linux as they would be if we, treated them better, I guess. I mean, at this point, you could have somebody that tries to donate time to make systemd better, just for somebody to say, I hate systemd. Why did you do that? I mean, that's literally the type of, environment that we're in right now. And I don't want to make it out to be that all Linux communities are bad. There's many great ones out there. It's just that in general, there's some infighting within the community, and I really do feel like it holds Linux back. Next, let's return to optimism and talk about a pro. And the pro that I'm going to talk about right now is the fact that there's all kinds of distributions available. There's a bunch of them. Now, that might be a con to some people because, well, sometimes choice can be overwhelming. Sometimes people just want to be told the direction they should go or be recommended. And having a choice of 100 distributions on DistroWatch, that really doesn't make it any easier for anyone. But actually, believe it or not, it's a pro. And here's why. If you download Windows or Mac OS, you pretty much have to use it as the vendors gave it to you. Again, they do let you customize it. I'm not going to say that either platform has zero customization because that simply would not be true. But there's not as much, customization when compared to Linux, but also there's a lot of variations of Linux. I mean, there's different distributions, and a distribution of Linux is a different collection of software. So you could have a different desktop environment, GUI, so you have a different UI for the user on one compared to the other. Maybe you have one distribution that prefers a different Office suite or something. Every distribution is a collection of software. And the reason why this is good is because for each person out there, I think there's a distribution that works for them. They just have to find it because so many people have created distributions that it's very common that somebody will find one that works for them because chances are somebody's already thought of the workflow that it is they intend on using. So it's a good thing to have all these different distributions, even though it might seem overwhelming. My recommendation is just to install Ventoy. It's an application you can install on a flash drive. And if it's a large flash drive, you could just, set up a bunch of Linux distributions on that. I have a video that shows you how to do that. And what you could do is actually use this to your advantage. What you could do is, load the Ventoy full of distros, boot from one of them. If you don't like it, shut it down and remove that distro from the flash drive. Start your computer up again, try another one, and just keep comparing them and deleting the ones that you don't like until you only have one left. And then chances are that's the one for you. Next, let's move on to a con when it comes to Linux. The thing is, Linux has a false impression of being a perfect operating system. And I really hate this because I feel like some of the backlash when it comes to Linux is because of some people floating it and just bragging about it and putting it on this pedestal that I just don't think that it should be on. Now, I do think Linux is a great platform and you should check it out, but I won't tell you that it's perfect. That's up for you to decide. But the thing is, some users out there, they pitch it as the best thing ever, the best thing that was ever created, a perfect operating system, but there's no such thing as perfect software. So anytime somebody tells you software is perfect, well, that's already a red flag. So I bring this up as a con because I want to make sure that I'm letting you guys know that Linux is not perfect. Yes, it could be the best platform for you and you'll probably love it, but I also don't want to, make your expectations so high that Linux can't possibly live up to it. And I think that's what a lot of people do. When they brag Linux up even more so than it deserves, then people are kind of let down by that when they find out it's not going to do all the things that they were told that it would do. But anyway, just make sure you take Linux at face value and you should be fine. Now what I'm going to do is end on a pro. And I think this is the biggest pro of all. You're going to love it. Seriously. When you switch to Linux, you're going to have a ton of fun. You're going to learn things that you never even knew about computers, good things. I'm not saying you're going to be overwhelmed unless you try a more advanced distribution. Don't do that. But as long as you make an informed choice when it comes to the distribution, then I think you're going to have a ton of fun. Just take your time. That's the main thing. Take your time. And if you start to feel discouraged or frustrated, just walk away from Linux for a little bit. It's not worth losing it. If you just keep going, even when it doesn't feel comfortable, you might get burned out. It's okay to take a break, put it on the back burner for a little bit, go about your business and your workflow, and then at some point come back to it and maybe it'll work out better. You just have to take care of yourself first, and that's important. But again, the main pro when it comes to Linux is that it's a ton of fun, and I think you're going to love it. And with that said, there's our video. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope it helped you out if you're migrating to Linux, if you're going through this journey. I hope you found something in this video that's going to make that journey even easier for you. Anyway, be sure to click the like button if you like this video to let YouTube know that you like this video. Who knows? If you do, we might see more Linux on YouTube, and that would be awesome. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.